Dick Cavett once made Richard Nixon so nervous, the president mentioned him 26 times on secret tapes. Now he's 88 and living a life that would confuse even his sharpest guests. After losing his wife to cancer, he remarried at 74. After a brutal stroke, he moved into a house too big to explore. After thinking his career was over, millions of Gen Z viewers discovered him online. He even starred in a rock music video last year. The man who interviewed legends is becoming one himself, but not the way anyone imagined. Dick Cavett was born on November 19, 1936. His birth certificate says Kearney, Nebraska, but he often said he was born in Gibbon. Both towns are in Buffalo County. Gibbon is where his family lived, and Kearney had the hospital. Over the years, Cavett gave mixed answers. He sometimes joked about it on his show. He told Carol Burnett he was born in Gibbon, but in other interviews, he said Kearney. The confusion has never gone away. Encyclopedias and news stories list both towns. Even Cavitt seemed to enjoy the mystery. For someone who built a career on truth and clever interviews, the fact that no one knows exactly where he was born feels strangely fitting. At just 10 years old, Cavitt lost his mother, Arabelle Richards. She died of cancer. That loss followed him for the rest of his life. He said no moment in adulthood ever hurt more. He was the only child in his class without a mother. That made him feel alone. He remembered hearing his father say, "The thing that's killing her is that she'll never get to see how Dick develops." That line stayed with him forever. It dug into his memory and added to his sadness. Cavitt later said this tragedy helped form his personality. It shaped the way he interviewed guests. It added weight to his humor. It gave him a deep understanding of pain, even as he built a life in the spotlight. One night in a church basement in Lincoln, Nebraska, something strange happened. Cavitt, still just a boy, sat in the audience for a magic show. The magician was another Nebraska kid named Johnny Carson. At that time, Carson was not famous. He was just a teenager with a deck of cards and a dream. Cavitt watched in awe. Years later, Cavitt also started doing magic. He even filled in for Carson at local events. That moment in the basement wasn't just a childhood memory, it was the start of something big. Both boys would grow up to become kings of late-night television. It all began with magic tricks in a small Nebraska room. Cavitt didn't just like fame, he was obsessed with it. As a kid in Lincoln, he staged magic shows in people's homes and schools. He hosted his own radio drama while still in high school. He hung around theaters to meet stars like Charles Lawton and Bob Hope. He wasn't shy. He wanted it all. Limousines, fans, applause. But this obsession came from something deeper. It helped him escape the pain of losing his mother. It gave him something to chase, a purpose. That drive pushed him out of Nebraska and into the Ivy League. It gave him the fire to survive the cutthroat world of showbiz. Cavett wasn't just dreaming of fame, he was preparing for it. When he got to Yale, Cavett didn't slow down. He started with English, then switched to drama. He performed in plays. He wrote, he learned, but something dark was happening inside him. At 18, he fell into his first major depression. It wasn't talked about much in the 1950s. People called it a slump, but Cavitt knew it was something worse. He said it was like walking through fog, unable to move, barely able to get out of bed. He kept going, but it was hard. He didn't tell many people. Even as he stood on stage, making others laugh, he felt empty. That pain stayed with him. It shaped his interviews later. It helped him talk to guests who also suffered. His years at Yale weren't just about success. They were about survival. In 1960, Cavitt was working at Time magazine. He earned $51 a week as a copyboy. It was a dead-end job, but it gave him time to think. He heard Jack Paar, host of The Tonight Show, needed better jokes. So Cavitt took a chance. He wrote a few one-liners, stuffed them in a Time envelope, and waited for Paar outside the men's room. When Paar walked out, Cavitt handed him the envelope. No introduction, no explanation, just a gamble. That night, Paar read the jokes on air. The audience loved them. Paar never said who wrote them, but within weeks, Cavitt had a job as a writer. That single act changed everything. It launched his career and turned him from a nameless copyboy into a rising star. That night was the real test. Cavitt didn't stay home. He snuck into the studio audience. He sat there, nervous, unsure if his jokes would make it on air, or worse, be laughed at for the wrong reasons. Then, Parr pulled a folded sheet from his pocket. Cavitt's jokes. He told the audience, "A kid gave me this. I don't know if it's any good." Cavitt froze. Then the audience started laughing. Real, loud laughter. In that moment, Cavitt felt something shift. The fear melted. He had made it. His jokes had worked. He wasn't invisible anymore. That moment, in the dark of the studio, was his quiet explosion into show business. When Johnny Carson took over The Tonight Show in 1962, he remembered Cavitt. The two had met back in Nebraska. Carson liked Cavitt's writing. He offered him a job. Cavitt became a trusted part of the team. He wrote monologues. He helped book guests. He even suggested Woody Allen, who later became a star. Carson was private. He didn't let many people in, but he let Cavitt in. They had dinners together. They talked shop. Carson even called him Richard as a nickname. Their bond was rare in a cutthroat business. It was real. Cavitt was no longer on the sidelines. He was shaping the voice of late-night television from behind the scenes. In 1963, Cavitt took a big offer. Jerry Lewis was starting his own variety show on ABC. The network gave him $8 million per season. Cavitt got a writing job for $200 a week, but everything went wrong. The show was chaotic. Microphones didn't work. Lights failed. The live format fell apart. Critics hated it. Audiences were confused. Only 13 episodes aired. It became one of the biggest flops in TV history. Cavitt later said, "Working on it felt like being on the Hindenburg. When it ended, he had to go back to Carson. It was humiliating, but it taught him something. Even the biggest names could fall, and fast." In 1968, ABC made a strange move. They gave a morning talk show to a man who didn't fit their usual mold. His name was Dick Cavett. He had gone to Yale. He wrote for Jack Parr and Johnny Carson. He told clever jokes on stage, but he didn't act like a typical TV host. On March 4th, his new show aired. His first guests were Buckminster Fuller, a visionary thinker, and Patricia Neal, an Oscar-winning actress who had just survived a stroke. It didn't feel like morning TV. He spoke about science, literature, politics, and philosophy. There were no cooking segments, no fashion tips, and no dancing dogs. Viewers didn't know what to make of it. ABC soon learned that Cavitt's clever tone was too sharp for sleepy audiences. Ratings dropped. They moved the show to a different time. Then they moved it again. But Cavitt didn't change his style. He refused to play dumb. He didn't chase easy laughs. That bold choice would shape his legacy. Then came an even riskier decision. In December 1969, ABC did something few believed possible. They put Cavitt on at 11:30 p.m. That meant going directly against Johnny Carson, who ruled late night like a king. It was a fight Cavitt wasn't supposed to win. Both men were from Nebraska. Both loved stage magic. But Cavitt leaned into tough conversations. Carson liked keeping things light. Viewers usually chose comfort, but critics preferred Cavitt. He wasn't afraid to ask tough questions or challenge guests. His show lasted 5 years in that time slot. That was longer than anyone had lasted opposite Carson before. And even though Carson had better ratings, Cavitt's show proved there was a real audience for smart, serious talk, even late at night. Cavitt's show became known for something else, too. His guest list shocked network bosses. In 1973, he booked Katharine Hepburn for her first-ever TV interview. That alone stunned the industry. He also brought on Sir Laurence Olivier. But the wildest moment came with Marlon Brando. Just months after Brando refused his Oscar for The Godfather, he showed up with members of the Paiute, Cheyenne, and Lummi tribes. Brando used his time on the show to slam Hollywood's racism and speak about native rights. He brought the Wounded Knee standoff into America's living rooms. Advertisers panicked. ABC didn't know what to expect anymore. Cavitt kept guests a secret, even from his own staff. Each night felt risky. That danger became part of the appeal. What made Cavitt different wasn't just who he booked, but how he talked. He asked deep questions. He challenged answers. He let guests argue. Sometimes it got messy. Segregationist politician Lester Maddox stormed off mid-show. Lily Tomlin walked out during a tense back and forth. One guest even died. On June 8, 1971, J.I. Rodale, a 72-year-old health guru, had just finished telling Cavitt he felt great and planned to live to 100. Moments later, while another guest spoke, Rodale leaned back, made a strange sound, and collapsed. Cavett called for help. 2 interns rushed in, but Rodale was already gone. ABC never aired the episode. Still, word spread fast. The irony was cruel. The moment was unforgettable. Not every disaster came from tragedy. One of the strangest nights in TV history happened on September 18, 1970. Cavitt welcomed John Cassavetes, Peter Falk, and Ben Gazzara. All 3 had starred in the film Husbands. They arrived drunk. They stumbled onto stage. They didn't answer questions. They smoked, laughed, rolled on the floor, and made fun of Cavitt. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or cringe. Cavett tried to stay calm, but the chaos didn't stop. At one point, he left the stage. Viewers were stunned. It was clear the show had gone completely off the rails. Cavitt later said it was the worst night of his career. The episode was never shown. But stories about that night lived on. Cavett also gave airtime to topics most shows avoided. In March 1968, he invited Christine Jorgensen, the first American to gain national attention after undergoing sex reassignment surgery. The conversation started calmly, but when Cavitt asked about her romantic life, Jorgensen stood up and walked off the set. She was the only guest that night. Cavitt sat there alone, unsure what to do. He spoke directly to the camera. He tried to explain, but the damage was done. That walk-off became a moment of national reflection. People were still uneasy with transgender issues. Jorgensen's exit exposed how far America had to go. When the Watergate break-in hit the news on June 17, 1972, most Americans were still confused by what it meant, but Dick Cavett saw it differently. He didn't start with outrage or analysis. He started with a joke. He asked, "How can the Democrats afford the Watergate Hotel?" That one line cut through the noise. It didn't just make people laugh. It made them think. Cavett turned his talk show into something more than entertainment. Just 2 days later, he brought Senator Edward Kennedy on air. From that moment, his show became part of the national conversation. He wasn't just reacting, he was shaping the way people understood what was happening. Then came a moment no one expected. G. Gordon Liddy, the man behind the Watergate break-in, sat down on Cavitt's stage. He didn't deny anything. He didn't dodge questions. He explained the plan in detail, right there on national television. Viewers didn't know what to think. It felt like a confession, and it was. Liddy gave the country a raw, uncensored look at how Watergate was born. Cavitt's show had become more than a platform for celebrities. It was now a witness stand. Millions watched, stunned, but not everyone admired Cavitt's influence. Richard Nixon saw a threat. Cavett had mocked, exposed, and questioned him, too often for Nixon's comfort. The president mentioned Cavett 26 times on the White House tapes. That number speaks volumes. Nixon even asked his team how to stop him. Behind the scenes, Cavett's staff faced sudden IRS audits. They were being punished, not for politics, but for asking questions on TV. Nixon saw Cavitt as a real danger, not a performer. That fear came straight from the Oval Office. In 2014, PBS released a documentary that pulled these moments back into the spotlight. It was called Dick Cavett's Watergate, and it aired 40 years to the hour after Nixon resigned. The film included interviews that hadn't been seen since the 1970s. It also featured new conversations with people like Henry Kissinger, Carl Bernstein, John Dean, and Bob Woodward. Cavett's own voice guided viewers through the story. He remembered the shock of hearing his name on Nixon's secret tapes. The documentary didn't just relive history, it preserved it. Long before any of this, Cavitt faced a different kind of battle. As a freshman at Yale in the late 1950s, he slipped into a dark depression. Back then, people didn't call it depression. They called it student letdown, or said he was just tired. But Cavitt felt it deeply. Getting out of bed became torture. He once said it felt like being a sick dog moaning, "Leave me alone." The silence around mental illness was heavy. Cavitt checked into a hospital under a false name to avoid shame. He even thought about driving into traffic to end it all. Those thoughts terrified him. They also made it clear how serious his condition was. By 1975, Cavitt had achieved national fame. He was clever, respected, and always in the spotlight. But depression still had him in its grip. That year, he reached out to Dr. Nathan Klein, a top psychiatrist known for groundbreaking work with antidepressants. It was a private plea for help. Klein prescribed medication that finally eased some of the weight Cavitt had carried for years. Fame didn't protect him, but it did give him the means to find expert help. Few public figures dared to talk about mental health back then. Cavett's actions were quiet, but they mattered. 5 years later, something terrifying happened. Cavett was boarding the Concorde, famous for its speed, comfort, and glamour. When panic hit, sweat poured down his face. He couldn't breathe. Airline staff had to remove him from the flight. It was one of his worst moments. He was taken straight to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York. No cameras, no jokes, just raw fear and exhaustion. That day, his illness refused to stay hidden. It showed itself in full view. Doctors at Columbia recommended electroconvulsive therapy. It was a treatment with a dark past, but Cavitt took the chance. He described the result like magic. His wife had doubts, but when she walked into his room afterward, he smiled and said, "Look who's back among the living." Years of suffering had never lifted so quickly. Antidepressants had helped, but ECT brought him real relief. And Cavitt didn't hide this part of his story. He talked about it. He showed people that even a controversial treatment could save a life. Behind all of this pain and recovery was a love story that never wavered. Cavitt met actress Carrie Nye at Yale. She had a sharp tongue and southern charm that caught his eye. They fell in love. After graduation, Cavitt worked 2 weeks at a lumberyard just to buy her a ring. They married on June 4th, 1964. Together, they built a life full of warmth, creativity, and struggle. One of their proudest achievements was restoring their historic Montauk home, Tick Hall. After it burned to the ground in 1997, they rebuilt it from scratch, using old photos and pure determination. But in 2006, Cavitt lost her. Carrie Nye died of lung cancer in their Manhattan home. She had been his partner in every way. Her death shattered him. There were no children, just silence. The house, once full of stories and laughter, felt cold. He stayed single for 4 years, navigating grief with no script, no audience. Friends remembered Carrie as a fierce supporter of others and a brilliant actress. For Cavitt, she had been everything. In 1997, another battle forced Cavett's pain into public view. A producer named James Moskowitz filed a $35 million lawsuit. He claimed Cavitt had walked away from a radio show after just 2 weeks. The real reason? Cavitt had suffered a manic-depressive episode. His lawyer confirmed it. The show had promised $500,000 a year. It ended almost immediately. Moskowitz lost money. Cavitt lost another part of his privacy. But the case also exposed the reality of his condition. Bipolar disorder had shaped much of his life. It didn't care about contracts or public image. Then, in 2010, something unexpected happened. Cavitt fell in love again. At age 74, he married Martha Rogers, a respected author and professor from Duke University. They tied the knot in New Orleans, a city full of resilience. She brought 2 stepchildren into his life. They settled in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Together, they faced new chapters, including a serious car accident that left Rogers injured. But the marriage gave Cavitt a reason to keep going. It reminded him that love can return, even after everything has fallen apart. In 2021, Cavett said goodbye to one of his greatest treasures. He sold Tick Hall, the Montauk estate he and Nye had rebuilt after the fire. The house sold for $23.6 million, far below its original $62 million asking price, but still a fortune. Tick Hall wasn't just a home. It had been their dream. Perched on 20 acres with 900 feet of ocean view, it had hosted legends like Muhammad Ali, Woody Allen, and Tennessee Williams. Cavitt called it the most magical place in all the world. Letting go of it meant letting go of a lifetime. In 2018, something struck Dick Cavitt. Without warning, a stroke, a severe one. He called it a wicked, wicked thing. It hit so fast he had to leave his beloved Montauk retreat and move to Ridgefield, Connecticut. He had no choice. He needed to be close to doctors and machines. The stroke changed everything. It robbed him of ease, independence, and safety. Suddenly, the man who once sparred with giants of culture was fighting to walk. His new home was massive, a 15,722 square foot Greek Revival mansion built in 1912. It had 10 bedrooms and 14 bathrooms. Cavett admitted he hadn't even seen every room. Some remained a mystery to him. The place wasn't for luxury. It was for survival. It sat close to hospitals. That's what mattered. But the irony never left. The home meant to protect him also swallowed him. He moved in to heal, yet the place felt too large to hold. Recovery wasn't quick. At first, he needed a cane, sometimes a walker. Every step reminded him of the fight, but he pushed on. Slowly, he got stronger. His hands steadied. His legs cooperated. His thoughts became clearer. Eventually, he said, everything has come back. He didn't feel broken. He didn't feel wounded. Not permanently. The stroke didn't win. It only delayed him. Before all this, writing was his therapy, his way to make sense of chaos. After the stroke, that changed. He stopped. The words didn't flow. The desire faded. But deep down, it still lived in him. He said he might try again because he was a writer. He felt better when he wrote. And even now, years later, he still wants to return to that rhythm. He still hopes the words will return. While he fought to recover, death kept circling his world. Two of his closest friends passed away, Ron Hull and Roger Welsh. Cavitt didn't hide the pain. He called Hull irreplaceable. The loss cut deep. These weren't just old friends. They were part of his history, part of his legacy, and now they were gone. The silence they left behind was heavy, unshakable. But something strange happened. At 88, Cavett went viral. His YouTube channel launched in 2018. Since then, it's gained more than 146 million views. Clips of him interviewing Lennon, Ali, Joplin, Brando. Old souls meeting new eyes. People too young to know Johnny Carson suddenly knew Dick Cavett. His calm style, his sharp questions, his pauses. All of it felt new again. The internet made him timeless. Then, another twist. He starred in a music video. The song was called Dick Cavett, written by Mark Ribler. It wasn't a joke, it was a tribute. The video blended new footage of Cavett with old clips from his show. Hendrix, Joplin, Lennon, all flashing by. Directed by Robert Bader. Produced by Rich Russo. Cavett's wife, Martha, even appeared in it. Cavett, the man of words and wit, became part of a rock song, and it worked. Still, the generational gap confused him. Young fans asked him questions that shook him. Who were the Marx brothers? Who was Johnny Carson? Cavett once sat across from Groucho Marx. He once competed with Carson for ratings. Now, he had to explain who they were. It stunned him, but he didn't get angry. Instead, he started writing down his memories. Stories that once felt ordinary now became history lessons. His YouTube fame wasn't just about legacy, it paid. His channel made between $800 and $1,400 each month. In December 2024, it brought in $1,290. In February 2025, $1,340. Not bad for interviews filmed decades ago. Interviews with Orson Welles, Anthony Hopkins, Julie Andrews. People still watched, still cared. Cavett's calm, thoughtful voice found a second life, and it kept paying the bills. Stephen Colbert once said Cavett shaped him, not just as a talk show host, but as a thinker. Cavett didn't rush. He didn't chase applause. He asked questions that mattered. He left room for silence, for emotion. He made room for discomfort. That was his gift. That was his courage. Cavett interviewed Lennon during Vietnam, Ali during civil rights protests, Dali during his surrealist peaks. He didn't avoid the hard moments. He leaned into them. He won 3 Emmys. He was nominated 10 times. In 1970, he even co-hosted the Emmys with Bill Cosby. In 1974, 1975, and 1979, he took home the award for Outstanding Individual Achievement. In 2012, he earned another nomination for his work with Mel Brooks. His impact stretched across decades. He didn't just win trophies, he changed the shape of conversation on television. In 2014, he released a book called Brief Encounters. It gathered his favorite New York Times columns and personal stories. Stan Laurel, Muhammad Ali, Steve Jobs. Jobs once asked Cavett to become Apple's first celebrity pitchman. He said no. The book was full of these strange, perfect moments. Mel Brooks called it perfect bathroom reading. It even earned a Grammy nomination in 2016 for Best Spoken Word Album. Cavett's voice, always precise, carried across mediums. His life wasn't easy, not even close. He battled depression for years. It started when he was at Yale. He needed electroconvulsive therapy at one point. In 1997, his beloved home in Montauk burned down. He and Martha rebuilt it. Same shape, same details, as if it had never been lost. Then came the stroke. Then came the silence. But Cavitt kept moving. He kept talking, kept living. At 88, Dick Cavett remains a symbol, not just of television, but of endurance. His life is a lesson. Pain doesn't erase brilliance. Silence doesn't erase voice. And age doesn't erase relevance. In a world obsessed with noise, he still proves that slow, honest conversation can change everything.